Good afternoon, fellow Rotarians and guests. Welcome to the Rotary Club of Toledo. Today we'll have another great program with UT Dean of the Law School, Ben Barros. First, I'd like to ask Father Ron Oczewski to come to the podium to deliver a reflection and have Christina Crystal lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let's bow our heads in prayer. Lord God and Father of us all, you created us in your image and likeness. You created us to be a social, gregarious people. And so we live and form families, tribes, villages, cities, states, and nations. You have given us wisdom to know that, living with one another, we need laws to protect both the individual and the common good. On this Law Day, we ask that you bless our lawmakers with the wisdom to know what is right in formulating our laws, that you bless our lawyers and judges with the wisdom to interpret the law and the courage to act rightly. May we all abide by the righteous laws that do protect both our individual and our common good. And to this prayer we say, Amen.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Father Ron and Chris. On behalf of all of my colleagues, thank you for blessing the lawyers. We always need that. As we begin our meeting, I'd like to thank and acknowledge Connect Toledo Downtown Development Corporation as this month's sponsor. And now would Greeter Tim White please go to the floor mic to introduce today's visiting Rotarians.
President Dick, we have 4 visiting Rotarians today. Visiting Rotarians, please stand as I read your name and remain standing until President Dick welcomes you. Sunil Mandy, Nave Griwal, PDG Gail Knepper, and DG Maris Brenner.
Welcome to you all. Thank you for being here. Now, does anyone have any other guests they would like to introduce to the group? If so, please go to the floor mic with your guest.
President Dick and fellow Rotarians, I'd like to introduce to you Annette Foster from RE/MAX Preferred.
Welcome. Nice to have you here.
I'll come off to you guys. I didn't want to jump the line.
That's all right. President Dick, I'm very pleased to have my daughter, Mary Helen Darrow, a graduate of the University of Toledo, and she's also an editor and writer for the Sylvania Advantage and a coordinator for the Sylvania Family Services.
Great. Thanks for being here.
President Richard, my guest is Craig Albers. Craig is president of Mercy St. Charles Hospital.
Welcome, Craig.
President Dick, fellow Rotarians, I have virtually my entire office here. Rob Melching, Ashley Futrell, Ava Rattel-Dustin, Jean Crawford, Annalita Cruz-Bridges, Jody King, and Alyssa Sterling. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you for attending.
President Dick, I have 2 guests with me today, Sunil Mande, who's visiting from India, and his daughter Shreya, who just graduated from University of Toledo with her bachelor's.
Welcome. Thank you very much.
President Dick and my fellow Rotarians, my guest today is Jim Park Sr. You'll be hearing more about his son, Jim Park Jr., in just a few minutes.
Wonderful. Welcome, Jim.
Would like to introduce my 2 law clerks. My senior clerk, Eric Flederman, comes to us via St. Louis, Missouri, graduate of Michigan Law School. Next to him, my junior law clerk, Steve Salcedo. He comes to us from Akron, New York. Buffalo, New York, graduate of Harvard Law School. And next to him is a summer intern who joined us today for the first time, Rebecca Wise, she is a student still at the University of Toledo College of Law.
And I would like to introduce my husband, Jude Aubrey, who's here. He's a lawyer and here to hear the Dean for Law Day.
Great to have all the guests with us today. Thank you for being here. I'd like to ask Scott Hinshaw or Donna Bogan to come to the floor mic to make an announcement about the community service, the member engagement deal for Kids Against Hunger this Saturday. Go ahead, Scott.
Thank you, President Dick. And it's both. It's community services and member engagement. We're joining forces. It's this Saturday. Rotarians from 9 a.m. to noon will be at Ottawa Hills Elementary School to do the annual food pack. We hope to pack more meals than we ever have in the past, so we're joining forces with a couple other area Rotary groups, and it should be a good time. We'll have some coffee and donuts to get everybody started that morning, and we will also have entertainment provided by our own Chuck Mann. There might be a few jokes. It could just be music. I don't know. You'll have to come to find out if you want to see. But it should be a fun time. We hope you can make it. Sign up through the Spoke or online, or just tell myself or Donna and we'll get you signed up, or just come on out on Saturday. Thanks.
Thank you, Scott. It's a great family event. Thank you. I also want to add that we have other Rotary clubs in the area participating in the food pack. So again, it's another example of Rotary working together through its many clubs and people. Now I'd like to have Bob DiNardo, Mesa Chair, make an announcement from the mic.
Thank you, President Dick. The Mesa, I'm just here to remind you that we do have the Toledo Bonus Ride coming up on June 8th, and it's going to be a great affair. Ford Bennett is our chair. He couldn't make it here today. We also have the regular Mesa Bike Ride starting the following week, and that would be June 13th through, I believe, the 17th. So I'm hoping that as many of you as are able can get to the ride. I'm open for pledges. Anybody wants to make a pledge to me? I got a free Mesa pin for the first one. Don't be shy. Come see me afterward. Second one gets a Mesa pen, so always begging for money. But it's a great event on June 8th down at the Middle Grounds. It's a short little ride, and have a blast. Thanks, Dick.
Thank you, Bob. Now would be a great time to like Toledo Rotary on Facebook and also check in to let people know that you are here at our meeting today. And then I ask that you turn off or silence your cell phones for the rest of the meeting so we can all fully enjoy the program. We had a great Rotary District Conference this past weekend at Kalahari. It was hosted by District Governor Maris Brenner, who we introduced earlier, and she throws a great party, so thank you, Maris, for a great time. And we're fortunate to have the keynote speaker with us from the district conference today, past District Governor Gail Nepper. If Gail's going to give a few words. Gail is a Rotarian from Anchorage, Alaska. She served as District Governor of District 5010, the largest geographic Rotary district in the world, comprising Alaska, the Yukon, Siberia, and Far East Russia. So please give a Rotary welcome to past District Governor and Rotarian Gail Nepper.
Hello, Rotarians and friends.
Hello.
Thank you. Thank you. It has been a real pleasure for me to spend the last almost a week now in your district, both visiting Rotary clubs and at the conference. And today, to join you for the club meeting and the celebration of Law Day. Thank you to all of you who were participating in the conference. It truly was an outstanding celebration of the achievement of the Rotary clubs in this district, actions that are clearly changing lives. I am taking away many new outstanding ideas that I'm going to share with other clubs and districts as I travel, and I was inspired to hear about the impact that Rotarians and Rotary clubs are having in home communities and around the world. Rotarians, I bring you greetings from Rotary International President Barry Rassin and Esther. Barry recognizes the significant work that you're doing here in the Toledo Rotary Club and throughout District 6600. Of course, they wish they could have been here with you, but with over 500 district conferences in a year, we know that that's not possible. And so what happened, of course, he cannot be with you, but I am very pleased that he asked me to be his representative. We know that Rotary's theme this year is Be the Inspiration. President Barry tells us about 4 elements of the ability to inspire: to show our love and empathy to each other and the communities that we serve, to show our enthusiasm for Rotary and changing the world at a level that's both compelling and contagious. Be an agent of change with an audacious challenge to ourselves and to others to do more than we ever thought was possible. And finally, to lead by example. Rotarians do not wait for a solution. They work to create it. What your club has achieved over the past 107 years is truly remarkable. You Toledo Rotarians are the inspiration. As your club starts its 2nd century of service, your work is changing the future of others in this community and around the world. Day by day, year by year, you are making that difference. From the beginning of your club, focusing on projects to support disabled children, until today, dedicating millions of dollars for transformational projects in your community, your club is leading the way in the city of Toledo, in Rotary, and the world. Rotarians, you are people of action. Thank you so much to changing the world and your commitment to Rotary.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you. I'm always happy to recognize Toledo Rotarians who have received special honors, and today we congratulate Toledo Rotarian Tracy Tangeman, U.S. Attorney, for her recent Wings of Excellence Award. Wings of Excellence are awarded annually by the Cleveland Federal Executive Board to a select number of federal employees who exemplify the best in government service. So let's please recognize Tracy Tangeman. Congratulations. The Black Tie Affair is coming. It's only a month away, and I want to take a moment again to recognize our great sponsors for that event. They should be popping up on the screen shortly. There they are. And of course, they'll receive more recognition. Speaking of the Black Tie Affair, we have a special announcement today from the inimitable First Vice President, Golden Boy Alex Dew.
Thank you, President Dick, distinguished Rotarians and guests. Many of you are probably asking why. Well, I'm here to announce that we will be having a golden ticket during the gala affair. This golden ticket, anybody could have it. There will only be 200 printed and sold. And that golden ticket could win you any one of the live auction items. So that would pretty much be a steal if anybody were to take a $5,000 vacation home away for $100. The raffle sponsored by the Toledo Ticket Company. They are printing the tickets as well as designing them. So you will have some Rotarians asking you to please purchase a ticket. They're $100 each. You can only buy one, unless you beg. You can probably get 5 if you really wanted. So we are having a committee meeting after this meeting for the for the Golden Ticket Sales Committee. And please purchase your tickets. Now, I'm hoping the police officer in the back of the room is not here to take me away.
Thank you, Alex. May is Women in Rotary Month, and we want to especially honor the women of our club. As I said last week, it's probably the best decision that Rotary ever made 30-some years ago to accept women in our clubs. So to kick off our brief presentation and honoring ceremony today, I'd like to invite our Executive Director, Kathy Tate, to introduce our presentation.
Thank you, President Dick. Fellow Rotarians, before I introduce Sue Martin, a dear friend, a mentor, and a confidant, I love her dearly. I just want to share a few things. So we're going to commemorate the anniversary of Women in Rotary, and I looked up a few stats this morning. So I joined the club in 2003, and in 2003 there were 43 women in Rotary in this club. In 2012 there were 78. And currently we have 101. So from the time I joined, that's a 57% increase in women. So I think, yep. And Sue Martin is one of those who actually started it all. So just a little bit of information. She's a past president. She was the club's first female president, 1994-95. She is an honorary member of our club now. She's the 10th active honorary member. She was the second female member of this club also, so she's been a trailblazer since she showed up here, and we just welcome her. And so I invite her to the podium to share with you a little more information on this anniversary, and welcome Sue Martin. Thank you.
Well, my daughter has thrown me off completely. She's the police officer in the back of the room. I didn't know she was coming, my dear, beautiful daughter, Amy Martin. And I welcome, yes, thank you. Talk about giving your life of service. We have to take our hats off to our first responders always. But I want to welcome Gail and Maris here today. So wonderful to have you as we honor women in Rotary. And thank you for all that you have done for Rotary. I'm delighted to be here to speak on behalf of the women today, the female Rotarians, in the 32 years of the anniversary of women in Rotary. I'm grateful to have been asked to be a Rotarian and to have served our club and the community through Rotary with the distinguished leaders of our Toledo community for all of my 31 years. The opportunities and challenges have been invaluable and even life-changing. As I begin, I'd like to ask all the men who were members of our club in 1988 to raise their hand. Oh, wonderful. Okay, quite a few. Keep them up. That's good. Can you see all these hands? Thank you. Still Rotarians. There were over 500 members in the club in 1988, all males. Now, would the ladies please raise their hand? All the female Rotarians, raise your hands. Wow, this is great. And as Kathy pointed out, we have 440 members and 101 are females, so that's great. What has changed and how did it happen? In May of 1987, the United States Supreme Court ruled that Rotary may not exclude women from membership on the basis of gender. And so in the year of 1990, 1 year after the Constitution was changed, there were 20,200 female Rotarians worldwide. That happened very quickly in 1 year. Locally, Ben Dansard, and I don't think Ben is here today, is he? Ben Dansard was president of our Toledo Club when the vote was taken to admit women into Toledo Rotary. Ruth Scott, who was superintendent of Toledo Public Schools, was the first female member admitted. Linda Riggs, Sue Doherty, and I were the ones that followed immediately after that, and the rest is history. Toledo Rotary was ahead of Rotary International, admitting women in 1988, which speaks volumes to me about our club and its forward-thinking male members. Thank you, men. I took the opportunity to ask dear Dick Anderson, president in 1975 and a 60-year member of our club, and Chuck Stocking, past district governor, past president of our club, and also a 42-year member of our club, to comment on the changes and the impact after women were admitted. Dick Anderson pointed out that the decision to admit women was both revolutionary and historic. He believes the change has been transformational. He continued that Rotary is much more organized in every aspect of the operation. Thank you, Dick. The creativity, skills, leadership, and selflessness of our female members have made our club more effective in fulfilling our mission of service. Dick concluded that he credits the infusion of women into Rotary as the primary reason for Rotary flourishing globally and locally in the midst of societal changes that have diminished membership and stature of most service clubs. Chuck Stocking said, "You don't have to be a rocket scientist to realize that women are increasingly taking the lead in bringing greater order and grace to the world, and especially the world of Rotary." He continued that it's clear to look at the 6 priority areas of service and realize that good judgment and experience of women have played an important role in bringing focus to the prioritizations of Rotary's uplifting efforts globally. Chuck highlighted the surface areas and reflected upon the wisdom and the warmth that women bring to important work of Rotary. The service areas are peace and conflict prevention and resolution, disease prevention and treatment, water and sanitation, maternal and child health, basic education and literacy, and economic and community development. Chuck added that he cannot imagine a men-only organization that could think wisely or strategically on these important service areas. Thank you, Dick and Chuck. Chuck said that the Rotary is leading the world in recognizing and supporting the growth of women. And to this, I want to add that Toledo Rotary has encouraged and promoted leadership for female members. We've had 4 female presidents and 1 district governor, Helen, thank you, and since 1988, and I was honored to be chosen as the first female president, which was quite an experience for me. Women are fulfilling leadership roles on committees, service committees, projects, fundraisers, and the foundation, and Rotary has encouraged these opportunities for growth and skill development. We've been empowered, and we too have been advocates for change. The impact is tremendous. It's been a win-win for all of us. Today, females are more than half of the population. Representation in Rotary is important for women and people of color. Both of these populations bring an increase in volunteers, financial stability, vision, understanding, and leadership. Our club can survive and thrive for another 100 years of growth and leadership. We can all make it happen. And I want to say how fortunate we are to have Phil Marissy. Are you here, Phil? No. Oh, my God. Oh, okay, yay. Phil Marissy in our midst, in our membership, who has put together an amazing 2-minute video having interviewed 6 female Rotarians and doing an inordinate amount of time and effort in putting this together. So please watch, and thank you to Phil and to the participants for participating in this video.
Rotarians I've noticed are willing to go anywhere where the need is and to do that in any way that they can effectively.
You look around our club and everybody is willing to jump in and do things, and all you have to do is ask somebody. You rarely hear the word no.
Rotary is a beautiful organization, and I think it gives so much.
We are Toledo Rotary. We are Women of Action.
Rotary is an organization that if you believe in service and positively impacting your community through service, that this is an organization for you.
Whatever we're committed to, we do it well.
Our connections make powerful things happen, uniting individuals and communities.
I think if you are interested in giving of your time, treasure, talent, there's not a better organization to be a part of than Toledo Rotary.
With over 400 Toledo Rotarians and over 1 million Rotarians worldwide, we know what people can do when they come together.
In a Rotary Club the size of ours, there's so much expertise and there's so much passion and there's so many things that people are really interested in connecting with in the community. And so when you can bring all of that together, whether it's through our grant programming, through volunteer projects, I think we really hit a large spectrum of the work that is happening in the community.
You happen to be looking at one of the largest clubs in the world, and because we are a larger club, we have the ability to have more avenues open to folks. No matter what your passion is, you can find a fit in our club.
That's one of the things that really attracted me to this Rotary, is because the openness of saying you can do as much or as little. And so I've been able to find that balance because Rotary's been so open to working moms and working women.
Join leaders, exchange ideas, and take action with us.
You go out there and you think that you're going to make a change, and at the end of the day, you realize how it changes you when you see the rewards that are reaped from us giving.
Find out more at ToledoRotary.org.
Thank you, Sue, very much. Thank you, Phil, for that great video. We appreciate it. This time I'd like to invite President-elect Tim Ryan to the podium to introduce our new member, Jim Park, Jr.
Thank you, President Dick and fellow Rotarians. It's my pleasure today to introduce what will soon become the newest Rotarian in the world. Before I do that and introduce Jim Park, I asked him, are there any things that you'd like me to say? And he gave me a full sheet of paper to pick and choose from. And then a few days later, he gave me another full sheet of paper to pick and choose from. And then today I noticed I have an additional sheet of paper to pick and choose from. There's lots to talk about. I'm not going to go through the full 3 pages, but he said, as I'm thinking about this is an opportunity. Do you mind, above all, do you mind telling the membership that I'm on Match.com? In addition to that, he says, this is kind of a big deal for me. If you don't mind, would you mention it 3 times about Match.com so they get the point? But I want you to do it in such a way that I don't appear needy. In any case, we are lucky to have joining us a new Rotarian. He's a local, graduated from Sylvania High School, young man, 25 years old. He's a partner in the insurance firm of Park Insurance, and he specializes in commercial insurance. He's graduated from Ohio Northern with a degree in marketing. He's a professional trumpeter. A professional, let's go with musician because I can't say trumpeter today. But he's this is serious stuff. He's played with Doc Severinsen. In addition to that, he's sung at Carnegie Hall. He plays the piano locally, and he sometimes hosts his own radio show. Pretty impressive resume from my point of view, but his greatest desire is to get off Match.com.
Chuck, we might not need you at the end of the program today. I'd like to invite Rotarian and the Honorable Jack Zuhari to the podium now to introduce today's speaker.
No lawyer jokes today, please, but I do want to acknowledge the lawyers in the room. All the lawyers, please stand so we can acknowledge you. Now you can sit. Thank you. As you know, lawyers are active participants in many communities around the country, serving on boards and groups like this. I am delighted and privileged to introduce Ben, Dean at the UT Law School. He's been there since 2015. He comes to us from Pennsylvania, before that New York City. I'm only going to steal one item from his official bio, which is in the Rotary Spoke. He's on the Executive Committee of the Association of American Law Schools. This is an exciting and challenging time for law school education. New efforts, as the profession has changed, new efforts to have law schools turn out practice-ready lawyers. Ben teaches as well at the law school, teaches real property, an expertise he has developed over the years. He can talk to us about res ipsa loquitur, adverse possession, mens rea, a number of topics, but I would rather he talk to us about malolactic fermentation. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's not a legal phrase, but it is a role that if you're in winemaking, you understand. And Ben is involved in making wine and can tell you how that fermentation impacts a creamy Chardonnay. He also gives wine tasting classes and auctions his services for charity, Cooking with the Dean, not to be confused with cooking recipes from Paula Dean. That's a totally different kind of Dean. What may have set Ben on a legal course is that his great-grandfather, not a lawyer, but a serious inventor who was not a very good businessman and who perhaps could have used a lawyer back at the turn of the 1900s. His great-grandfather invented an outdoor motor for a boating customer, sold the rights for a mere $100. Perhaps you've heard the name, Evinrude. And with that introduction to talk to us about maybe wine and how it impacts the freedom of expression, I give you Ben.
Thank you, Judge Zuhari. President Dick, fellow Rotarians, I need to get my remote out, which I neglected to do. My apologies. I'm very glad to be here to talk with you at Law Day. I was promised not a lot of lawyers in the audience, and I'm a little disappointed to see the entire United States Attorney's Office here. I'm a property lawyer by trade and by expertise, but today I'm going to be talking with you about free speech and freedom of expression on campus and beyond. That is a theme of this year's Law Day. Is freedom of expression. The purpose of Law Day is to educate the public about the rule of law and about the legal system. And so I will be providing a very high-level overview of the law of freedom of expression, and then talk about free speech in the university and law school setting. It's a topic that's been gaining a lot of press attention and has been the focus of some things we've been doing at the University of Toledo this past year. So, let's start with the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So if you're at doing trivia or something like that, a fairly common question is, what are the 6 things that the First Amendment protects? So there's 1 prohibition, establishment of religion, and then 5 freedoms: free exercise of religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition of redress of grievances. So just a quick bit of constitutional history. The Bill of Rights and the freedoms therein originally applied only to the federal government. If you go back, note that the first word is Congress. There's nothing about the states or anything like that.
They are now seen as applying to the states through the 14th Amendment's Due Process Clause. So it now clearly applies to governmental entities at all levels and of all types. So, that said, the Bill of Rights only applies to governments and to people acting on their behalf. It does not apply to private people or entities. If you've ever had your child say to you, Mom, Dad, you can't restrict my freedom of speech because of the First Amendment, your child is wrong. That has actually happened to me, especially from our younger child, who is quite the lawyer. As a private person, the First Amendment does not apply to you. A maybe more pertinent example is zoning regulations versus homeowners association regulations. Zoning regulations are imposed by the government, your local municipal government, and homeowners associations are regulations are imposed by a private entity, your homeowners association, or a set of private covenants that govern what you can do in your community. So a zoning board cannot prohibit you from putting a election sign on your front lawn. That's a piece of political speech, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. Since it's a government entity, it cannot restrict your free speech. Your local homeowners association, though, that private entity, could put in a rule that says no election signs, and that would be perfectly okay because it's not a governmental entity. So, scope of free speech protection. Almost any type of speech or expressive behavior is protected. Two very famous cases, Texas versus Johnson, the flag burning case, Cohen versus California, F the draft. In our legal system, almost any type of speech is protected. There are some narrow exceptions: obscenity, perjury, defamation, harassment, incitement of illegal activity, fighting words, truth threats. There are a couple more. But these are very, very, very narrow. And there is some distinction between political speech and commercial speech. Commercial speech might get a little bit less protection in various contexts. But political speech, speech about political issues or in favor of or in opposition to a political candidate, that's what we often call core political speech, and that is given our highest level of protection. And again, in our legal system, we really tend not to say that, have any kind of content-based restrictions on what somebody can say. So, but there are governments can impose reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions on speech. So we don't regulate the content, but we can sometimes regulate how it's delivered. And so an example there is prohibiting loudspeakers during certain hours. So maybe a loudspeaker is a reasonable way of sharing your political speech, but not at 2 o'clock in the morning outside my bedroom. Place, prohibiting demonstrations, for example, at the entrance of a building where it might impede access to the building or from the building in case of a fire. Manner, regulating the signs of signs or posters. So your local municipality can probably regulate the size of the election sign that you put on your front lawn. Maybe they can prohibit you from having a 20-foot sign, but they can't prohibit you from having a sign at all. So, talk about campus free speech. This is a topic that's gained a lot of attention. The president recently signed an executive order last 10 days or so. This executive order is seeking to require colleges and universities to enact free speech statements. And we're going to be looking at one that we, in just a few minutes, that we just put in the University of Toledo. The quid pro quo there is that if universities do not, they will not be eligible for research funding. So potentially a big deal. I'm not sure I like that way of going about it. But there's a distinction here between public and private institutions. So I'm at the University of Toledo. We are a government entity. The First Amendment already applies to us. But private universities and colleges, that's not so clear. So this is a way of trying to get a particular way of looking at free speech and freedom of expression to apply to colleges and universities that are not already public institutions. There have been a wide range of incidents involving campus free speech, speakers being shouted down, incidents of violence. A lot of them, and I'll talk about a couple of them as we go through, really pretty unfortunate. I want to just highlight another distinction. The two big distinctions that we should keep in mind is the one that I mentioned about public versus private institutions, but also about public lectures versus the classroom. So you imagine you come to the University of Toledo College of Law to see a public lecture. Are the issues we might think about, it might be a little bit different. Thinking about a public lecture versus something in the classroom. The classroom, I think, hopefully intuitively you think, we might want to have a little bit more control over what happens in the classroom to facilitate learning and for a couple other reasons that I'll talk about in a little bit. So, campuses are supposed to be places of free inquiry, right? That's what we're institutions of higher education. We're supposed to challenge people. We're also communities and hopefully civil and respectful communities. And ideas can be divisive. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody, and words can hurt. And I think it's, unfortunately, sometimes when we talk about this, we don't take as seriously as we should this idea that words can hurt, and that words, and talking about really divisive issues, can be emotionally challenging and sometimes traumatic for people. And so it's, I think when we're talking about this, we need to take this idea that words can hurt very seriously. So let me talk about just one example. Charles Murray, he's the author of The Bell Curve. There are 2 chapters in The Bell Curve that has received a lot of attention, deservedly so. I don't think they're very good chapters, but that raised the issue of race and IQ. So he's but a pretty accomplished otherwise political scientist. And in one recent example, I think it was last year, he was shouted down at Middlebury College. He was invited to give a lecture. A bunch of students disrupted the lecture, shouted him down, rushed the stage, knocked over the professor who had invited him and gave her a concussion. So it was a pretty negative incident. And I should say, there have been a number of examples. There's another one that happened in UC Berkeley. A student was speaking in an area where there's a lot of public speech and was articulating a particular view, and a student who disagreed with it came up and punched him in the face. And so acts of violence are never okay, right? And they never should be viewed as okay. And that's the easy case, right? I mean, obviously that was not an appropriate behavior. But we get to some harder line drawing issues. But back to Charles Murray. Compare the incident at Middlebury to Murray speaking twice at Yale Law School. Dean Heather Gerken, who wrote a nice piece on law school freedom of expression, said this: students and faculty engaged with him, and students held separate events to protest and discuss the implications of his work, but he spoke without interruption. That's exactly how a university is supposed to work. And Dean Gerken's article, it's in Time Magazine, is a little bit self-congratulatory about lawyers and law students. Those of you who know us as lawyers, we can get that way sometimes. But I will say that I was very pleased. We've had several controversial speakers come in to the University of Toledo College of Law since I've been here. We had a speaker come in a couple years ago whose work is pretty critical of race-based affirmative action, which is one of the more controversial issues that we deal with in law schools. And I spoke with a lot of students that weren't particularly happy that the speaker was coming, but they were all very clear that the speaker had the right to be there. They would not interrupt his speech. But what they did is they prepared very hard questions and asked very hard questions about his speech when he was done. So, freedom of expression issues can be particularly acute in law schools, which is why I think about it. I'm a property lawyer, but I think a lot about freedom of expression in my role as a dean. And because law schools have to deal with controversial issues, the most divisive issues in our society play out in our legislatures and our courts, including abortion, affirmative action, same-sex marriage. You wouldn't think that women being members of private clubs would be such a controversial issue, but apparently it was about 30 years ago, as we heard about earlier. So we deal with these very difficult issues, and we don't get to duck issues because they're controversial, right? Lawyers can't just stand up and say, sorry, Your Honor, I don't want to address that argument because it offends me. We need to be able to take arguments that we don't like and try to come up with arguments about why we think that they are wrong. And so to adequately prepare our students, we need to be able to deal with controversial issues. We need them to be able to think about these issues and be able to discuss them in both public lectures and in the classroom. So the University of Toledo Faculty Senate and the College of Law Student Bar Associations both recently adopted statements based on the University of Chicago Statement on Freedom of Expression. There are copies of this on your table. I'm just going to read a couple of pieces of it. So it just starts, the Faculty Senate adopted this past year, and it talks about freedom of expression is essential to the University of Michigan. And it says, because the university is committed to free and open inquiry in all matters, it guarantees all members of the university community the broadest possible latitude to speak, write, listen, challenge, and learn. It goes on in that middle paragraph. Of course, ideas of different members of the university community will often and quite naturally conflict, but it's not the proper role of the university to attempt to shield individuals from ideas and opinions they find unwelcome, disagreeable, or even deeply offensive. Although the university greatly values civility, although all members of the university community share in the responsibility of maintaining a climate of mutual respect, concerns about civility and mutual respect can never be used as a justification for closing off discussion of ideas. However offensive or disagreeable those ideas may be to some members of our community. And just one more thing that I want to read from the very end at the second page. As a corollary to the university's commitment to protect and promote free expression, members of the university community must also act in conformity with the principles of free expression. Although members of the university community are free to criticize and contest the views expressed on campus and to criticize and contest speakers who are invited to express their views on campus, they may not obstruct or otherwise interfere with the freedom of others to express their views, express views they reject or even loathe. And so we had an interesting discussion at the University of Toledo about whether adopting the statement is a good idea. But now if you see in the press talking, what are we talking about when we're discussing free speech statements? This is an example. This is based on one that was drafted at the University of Chicago and is the one that gets the most attention nationwide. And so the discussion, this was actually proposed to the Faculty Senate by two of the faculty members at the College of Law, one very conservative, one very liberal. Free speech statements right now are often associated with protecting conservative speech. Conservatives are often arguing for universities to adopt these types of statements. I should note, though, that I don't view this, and most people don't, as a liberal versus conservative issue. And the Georgetown Center for Freedom of Expression did a study, and nationwide there have been more incidents, actually, of liberal speech being squelched than there has been conservative speech. So it was promoted by a couple of our faculty members, but another of our faculty members was very critical of it, and what he was talking about, what he was concerned about was the right to protest. And that last paragraph really talks about allowing people to speak. And there's a view that would say, hey, the solution to speech you disagree with is supposed to be more speech, so why can't people protest? And I think the answer to that is they can, as long as it's not disruptive, but there were questions about, okay, what exactly does that mean? So, some issues that come out of this that we can think about a little bit. Are there some ideas that are so beyond the pale that we shouldn't even hear them? And if you spend a little bit of time thinking about it, I think I can come up with some. It's hard, I think, but I think there are some. And by the way, back to the time, place, and manner idea, a university, I think, could bar a speaker. Interestingly enough, if that speaker is so controversial that the security costs to prevent violence are going to be so high that it would be cost prohibitive, that's, I think, probably a decent reason for a university not to have a speaker. But one downside of that is it leads to something called the heckler's veto, right? Which is that if somebody is going to protest loud enough, they can shut down speech that they disagree with. So that's something we need to think about. And also, as I was just suggesting, we need to think about the balance between the right to speak and the right to protest. And both of those things are important, and what this policy tries to do and what we try to think about in universities is try to balance those two things, and definitely not to shut down protesters. Protest is important, but try to not let protests get to the point, as it did in Middlebury, to the point where speech is actually shut down. So classrooms, I think, are very different than public lectures. Students can't choose not to attend. I think that's one really important thing, right? Class attendance is mandatory. If there's something being discussed at a public lecture that you don't like, you don't have to show up. We also need to facilitate learning. And one of the things that I talk about at orientation, and we think about a lot at the College of Law, is being respectful of each other to create an environment where people feel like they can learn. But there's this interesting tension between civility and self-censorship. And I guess I would be concerned if our law students weren't thinking about both of these. I think it's important to think about how to be civil and a respectful member of a community of learning. But also, it's not a great thing if we avoid difficult issues if people aren't willing, or if they self-censor and are not willing to raise them. And so Stanford Magazine just very recently published an issue on free speech, and two of their law professors wrote articles that were included in that. And one of them, Ralph Richard Banks, pointed out words are dangerous. That's why we should always choose them with care. And Michael McConnell, former federal appellate judge, very famous constitutional law professor, said, students do not feel free to express their views for fear of attracting a torrent of abuse from fellow students. They simply self-censor and they keep their mouths shut. And this is one of these tensions that I don't think there's a great solution to, right? I think there is going to always be a tension between respect and collegiality and self-censorship. Some of the things that we talk about are coming into a discussion where you're going to presume that the other person you're talking with is a person of goodwill, and presume good faith on their part, and even if you don't like what they say, maybe separate that from the person. But that's something that's very easy to say and very, I think, hard to do in practice. So, creating communities of mutual respect is hard. It only goes so far. Laws and rules also only go so far, and the law can't solve all of our problems. And kind of from the broader Law Day perspective about the legal system, just thinking about what laws do in our society. We act in everyday ways. Well, we're not going to litigate every interaction in our lives, right? And the law doesn't actually get to every interaction in our lives. This tension between self-censorship and civility is something that the law just can't get at. You're not going to have a lawsuit about that. And so we need to think about them. We need to think about values, and one of the things that the First Amendment is so important is that it embodies this value that we have in the United States of freedom of expression. But values they only help us if we're willing to embody them. And really, we're not going to get very far in any of these contexts if we're not willing to challenge ourselves and put ourselves in difficult positions, and also think about when we're in this context, when we're very upset with something that somebody else is saying, if we're not willing to take what they're saying seriously and they as a person seriously, then we can't really expect them to take us seriously either. And but I do think that these are very, very hard issues, ones that we think about every day, maybe not literally every day, but pretty much every day at the University of Toledo College of Law, when we're thinking about teaching our students on these difficult issues, when we're thinking about bringing in speakers, when we're thinking about establishing statements of values that we hold as a university. So with that, thank you very much for your attention. It's really a pleasure to be here.
Looks like we have at least one question.
Yes, sir.
First of all, it was a great presentation. My question is that U.S. has been a superpower since 1945.
Yes.
Do we have an obligation, a moral obligation, to promote freedom of expression in other countries?
That's a great question, and I would say I would want to be careful about that. And here's why. There are many countries that, take Canada, many countries in Europe that we very much respect their democracies, that are not as robust in protecting freedom of expression as we are. So we are an outlier internationally in the protection of freedom of expression. Most other countries would be more willing to restrict content. And I think that that's a debatable enough issue that I wouldn't want to go too far. That said, I do think freedom of expression is a core part of protecting and promoting democracy, and I do think it's appropriate for us to promote free expression, but I'm not sure that we want to impose our particular view on freedom of expression on the rest of the world.
But it does affect our cooperation in other countries.
Yes, absolutely.
Dean, it seems to me that of the 5 freedoms that are protected by the First Amendment, everybody's aware of speech, religion, and press.
Yeah.
But assembly and petitioning government for redress of grievances seem to be less well known but are of equal importance. Recently, it was posted that one chamber of a bicameral legislature in one of our southern states passed a law that, if adopted by the other house and signed by the governor, would prohibit more than 4 people arriving at a polling place in a single vehicle.
Right.
Now, recognizing that time, place, and manner is restricted by the word reasonable, what is your thought about what courts with the present-day makeup would do with that law in light of the ability to assemble peaceably, assuming that they aren't confronted by violence at the polling place, and petitioning government indirectly for the redress of grievances?
Yeah, so predicting what the Supreme Court would do is always a fool's game on that particular issue. I would say, let me just say what I think they should do. So freedom of assembly is incredibly important. And as you're reading about the lawsuits about partisan gerrymandering and about ballot access, the freedom of protection of freedom of assembly is kind of where the action is on that. Partisan gerrymandering arguably affects freedom of our freedom of assembly. That's kind of the First Amendment hook. So I think I have a hard time seeing what legitimate government purpose is served by restricting the number of people who are carpooling to a ballot place, I think that's actually, I have a hard time coming up with a rational basis for that. The lawyers in the room know rational basis is a very low threshold, and I have a very hard time even coming up with a defense of that. So I hope that particular law, if enacted, is struck down on assembly grounds. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for a very interesting discussion. You used the phrase faculty senate and university as though they mean the same thing.
Yeah.
Those of us who are from the academic community know full well that that's not the case.
Right.
How did you justify, after the faculty senate passed the resolution, did the board of trustees deal with it? Where did it go from there?
Good question. Okay, so the faculty senate adopted it. As I mentioned, our student bar association adopted it. I'm not sure that the university, it's an interesting question whether it needs to adopt it. We actually already have policies on free speech. So there are currently existing policies at the university level that are largely consistent with the statement of values, although they might not go quite as far. There's also an interesting question about what this statement of values actually achieves. Well, what it does is it achieves what it is a statement of values. It doesn't change anything legally because there's nothing in here that's inconsistent with the First Amendment. And as I mentioned, the University of Toledo as a public institution is governed by the First Amendment. So I don't know whether there's any plan to revisit university policies, but there are 3 or 4 that are already existing that are pretty protective that are already in our policy setup. But this was what, and the significance was this was the faculty. So the faculty senate or our student bar association, they were saying as a matter of just a statement of values, this is important to us, and so we want to enact this statement.
Well, you do know for sure that Texas universities, for example, during the Vietnam War, took very different positions on that particular bill.
Sure. So our university has been very protective of freedom of expression. We had a big freedom of expression issue last year involving students putting up a sign that was very much anti the current president and some others tearing it down. So we take, I think, through our policies and through our actions, take freedom of expression very seriously. And I know that's true. Historically, that wasn't always the case. So anyway, I think I'm out of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great. Thank you. Ben, thanks for that great and informative presentation to show our appreciation. Our club foundation will make a donation in your name to the Rotary International Polio Plus Fund. And we also have this book about historical tales of Toledo for you. Thanks again. Please join us next week when our speaker will be Dr. Bina Joe, speaking about the pressure from the bugs within. Intriguing. I think we all need to be here for that. Jim, welcome again to Toledo Rotary, and Tim, thank you very much for introducing Jim. Maris and Gail, thank you so much for being with us today. We appreciate it. Following today's program, the Community Service Committee will be meeting in the Presque Isle Room. The Youth Services Committee will be in the North Cape Room, and the Golden Ticket sales team will follow the man in the gold suit to the Waynesfield Room. For all female Rotarians, we would love to get a picture of all of you today after the meeting. If you could please meet right outside in the lobby, and we'll try to do that quickly. Past President Chuck, all yours.
This was like a dream come true for me. We have lawyer jokes and jokes about ladies, and so I wrote 3, and to try and come and be prepared. And the first one, my lawyer jokes, I listened to Dean Barros, and he said words can hurt, and so that took that one right off the table. The second one had my joke about ladies. I didn't really come prepared for Officer Martin to be in the back of the room with handcuffs and tasers, so I took that one out. So that leaves us with this. A crotchety 80-some-year-old man was arrested for shoplifting. When it came time for his day in court, his saintly wife drove them to the courthouse, and when he went before the judge asked, "What did you steal?" He replied, "A can of peaches." The judge then asked him how many peaches were in the can. The man replied, 6. The judge then said, "I will give you 6 days in jail." As he raised his gavel, but before the judge could actually pronounce the punishment, the man's wife spoke up and asked the judge if she could say something. The judge said, "Sure, what is it?" The wife said, "He also stole a can of peas."
Thank you, Chuck, as always. Please remember, let's be servants out there so we can be the inspiration. We are adjourned.